Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive into some really fascinating Buddhist thought. Today, we're going to be looking at, let me start over. You sent me some excerpts from the Five Faculties. It's from Wings to Awakening on ThammaTalks.org. And I thought it would be really interesting, because we've talked about this before, to kind of dig into what these faculties are all about. So we've got conviction, persistence, mindfulness, concentration, and discernment, and how all of these actually work together as like a roadmap for achieving awakening. Kind of like, I don't know if you've ever thought about it like this, but have you ever felt like you have that strong inner compass that's kind of guiding you towards a certain goal? Well, the five faculties are kind of like that compass. But in this case, they're guiding us or pointing us towards liberation from suffering.
And the really cool thing is that this roadmap, it's not just some kind of abstract philosophy. It's actually rooted in practical steps that you can take. And each faculty builds upon the last one to create this powerful cycle of growth.
Yeah, that's really what caught my eye, too, this idea that they all work together, almost like a feedback loop. But before we get into that, in the source material, the word indriya is used for faculty. And right away I was thinking, okay, what's the deeper meaning here?
Yeah, that's a great question. It actually takes us all the way back to the ancient Vedic traditions. So India is linked to Indra, who is a very powerful god, who embodies this sense of dominance or control. So when we're talking about faculties in Buddhism, what we're really talking about are these mental factors that need to become dominant in our minds in order for awakening to even occur. It's like they're taking the reins and they're guiding our thoughts and actions towards that ultimate goal of liberation.
So it's not just about understanding these concepts intellectually, but about actually cultivating them to the point where they actually become like driving forces within us.
Exactly. And that's where the interconnectedness of the five faculties really comes into play. Each one is supporting and strengthening the others. So it creates this upward spiral of development. So why don't we start with conviction, which, I mean, to a lot of people, it might sound a little bit like blind faith, but it's actually much more nuanced than that.
Yeah, when I hear the word conviction, my Western mind goes to like religious faith, which isn't quite the same thing.
Yeah, and you're right to point that out. So conviction in the Buddha sense has three interconnected dimensions. You have trust, belief, and action. So trust refers to faith in the wisdom of enlightened beings like the Buddha and their teachings. And belief is accepting the core principles of Buddhism, like karma and rebirth.
Yeah.
But it doesn't stop there. You have the third element, which is action, which is really critical because you need to actually put these teachings into practice in your daily life if you want to move towards liberation.
So it's not just a passive acceptance, but an active engagement with these teachings. It's like saying, I believe that this is true, and now I'm going to go out and live my life in a way that actually reflects that belief.
Exactly. And it kind of brings us to this really powerful analogy from passage section 73, which compares conviction to the main post in a royal fortress. So you can kind of imagine that, this very strong, solid foundation that provides stability and protection, but that strength comes from its deep roots and that firm placement.
Yeah, that's such a vivid image. And it makes me think that without that solid foundation of conviction, everything else would just crumble. And it seems like that foundation naturally leads us to the next faculty, which is persistence.
Absolutely. Think of persistence as that energy. That's fueling our journey towards awakening. It's that unwavering commitment to keep practicing, to keep refining your understanding, even when things get tough.
Yeah, I can relate to that whenever I'm learning something new, whether it's like trying to play a musical instrument or I'm trying to master a new recipe. It's that persistence that gets me through the frustrating parts.
Exactly. And just like in those examples, persistence in the Buddhist context translates to right exertion on the Eightfold Path. So it's about consistently putting in the effort to cultivate those wholesome qualities and to let go of the unskillful ones. There's a great analogy in passage section 86. It compares persistence in meditation to tuning a musical instrument. So you don't want the strings to be too tight. You don't want them to be too loose. You need to find that perfect balance.
Okay, I love that analogy. It really speaks to this idea of finding that sweet spot where effort meets ease. And it seems like we're already starting to see how these faculties build on each other, with conviction leading to persistence. But where do mindfulness and concentration fit into this whole picture?
Well, imagine you're trying to tune that instrument, but you're in a really noisy room. It's going to be pretty hard to hear those subtle changes in the pitch, right?
So mindfulness is kind of like creating that inner quiet so we can actually like hear the music, so to speak.
Exactly. Mindfulness in the Buddhist sense is the ability to be present, to be aware, to observe your thoughts, your feelings, sensations, without judgment, without getting carried away by them. And you're right, it does create that inner stillness that we need to refine our understanding and to really make progress on the path.
And that inner stillness seems like the perfect breeding ground for concentration.
Absolutely. You can think of mindfulness as that foundation for deeper concentration. As we become more mindful, we develop the ability to focus our attention more sharply, and that leads to these increasingly profound states of meditative absorption, which are known as the jhanas.
Okay, now the jhanas are something I've heard about, but don't fully understand. They seem kind of mysterious and maybe even a little intimidating. But what's their purpose in this whole scheme of things?
Yeah, the jhanas are all about cultivating mental stability and clarity. Think of them as like mental training grounds where you develop incredible focus and resilience. And while they might seem a little esoteric, their purpose is actually very practical. So passage section 72 explains that the jhanas provide the mental stability that we need to develop true discernment, which is the next faculty on our list. You see, when your mind is constantly bombarded by distractions, by reactive emotions, it's hard to see things clearly. The jhanas help you to cut through that mental clutter and perceive reality with more accuracy.
So it's like the jhanas are like a mental gym where we're building up those mental muscles that we need for true insight.
That's a great way to put it. It's not just about achieving those blissful states of meditation, but about training the mind to be more stable, more focused, more resilient. And that then allows us to develop that crucial faculty of discernment.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued by this discernment piece. It seems like the culmination of all these other faculties we've been talking about. But what exactly is it? And why is it so crucial for achieving awakening?
Discernment is that ability to see reality as it truly is, without those distortions of our usual perceptions. It's like finally putting on the right pair of glasses and seeing the world in high definition. And what's fascinating is that discernment takes us from a kind of preliminary understanding of the Four Noble Truths to a truly transformative, visceral level of insight.
So it's not just knowing the Four Noble Truths intellectually, but actually experiencing their truth on a deeper level.
Exactly. Discernment allows you to not just understand that suffering exists, but to really see the causes of suffering in your own life and in the world around you. And when you see those causes clearly, that's when real transformation can happen.
That makes sense. But, as we're talking about discernment, something you mentioned earlier is kind of bouncing around in my head. You said that true mastery of the faculties involves escaping from them. That seems a bit paradoxical, doesn't it? I mean, if these faculties are so important for awakening, why would we want to escape from them?
It's a great question. And it points to this subtle but really crucial understanding in Buddhism. While these faculties are essential tools for achieving awakening, they're just that. They're tools, and we can't become attached to them.
So it's like using a ladder to climb onto a roof. But once you're up there, you don't need to keep carrying the ladder around with you, right?
Perfect analogy. Passage section 88 emphasizes that even skillful qualities, like concentration and discernment, can become hindrances if we cling to them too tightly. True awakening involves transcending even the tools that helped us get there.
So how do we escape these faculties if they're so deeply ingrained in the path to awakening?
It's not about abandoning the faculties altogether, but about recognizing their true nature. Think of it like this. You use a boat to cross a river, but once you reach the other shore, you don't carry the boat on your back, do you?
No, that'd be pretty silly.
Exactly. And in the same way, we use the 5 faculties to navigate the river of suffering. But once we reach the shore of liberation, we don't need to cling to those faculties anymore.
I think I'm starting to grasp this. But do you have like a concrete example of what this escape might look like in practice?
Okay, so imagine someone who has become incredibly skilled at discerning the truth, spotting falsehoods, understanding complex situations. They might even start to identify with that skill, thinking to themselves, I am a discerning person. But that very identification, that clinging to the faculty of discernment, can actually become a subtle obstacle. It's like the discerning mind becomes just another filter, another layer of conditioning.
Ah, I see. So it's not the faculty itself that's the problem, but our attachment to it, our identification with it becomes part of our ego in a way.
Exactly. There's a passage in DN1 that describes this beautifully. It says that an awakened person doesn't even hold on to the act of discernment itself. They achieve this state of knowing but not holding. It's like they've completely let go. Any attachment to that process of understanding. And in that letting go, they experience true liberation.
Wow, that's a really profound thought. It's like they're not even attached to being right or knowing. They're just present with what is, without grasping.
Exactly. And that brings us back to the interconnectedness of the five faculties. It's not just a linear progression. It's more like this continuous cycle. As we cultivate discernment, it actually strengthens our conviction, which leads to a deeper practice, which further develops all of the faculties, ultimately bringing us closer to liberation. It's this beautiful self-reinforcing system that really propels us forward on the path.
So it's like each faculty is like a spoke on a wheel. And as the wheel turns, each spoke supports the others. And it creates this momentum that moves us towards awakening.
That's a fantastic analogy. It really captures the dynamic and interdependent nature of the five faculties. And I think that's one of the most empowering aspects of this whole teaching. It shows us that the path to awakening isn't some distant, unattainable goal. It's something that we can actively cultivate through dedicated practice. And by nurturing these qualities within ourselves.
It makes me think of that passage, section 81, that asks, if heedfulness is the path to the deathless and heedlessness the path to death, how can you cultivate more heedfulness in your own life?
What a powerful question for all of us to consider. It's like a direct invitation to become more aware, more present, more engaged in each moment.
And the beauty of that question is it brings this whole teaching back to our everyday experience. How can we bring more mindfulness into our daily routines, our interactions, our choices? Maybe it's starting a daily meditation practice, even if it's just for a few minutes. Or maybe it's just making a conscious effort to be more present during conversations, really listening to what other people have to say.
It's almost like those small acts of awareness, those moments of presence, are like these tiny sparks that ignite this whole cycle of the five faculties.
Exactly. And as those sparks ignite, they fuel our conviction, our persistence, our mindfulness, our concentration, our discernment, leading us ever closer to that ultimate goal of liberation. Well, this has been such an insightful and inspiring deep dive. It feels like we've only just scratched the surface of this really rich and profound teaching, but it's given me a much clearer understanding of how the five faculties can actually work together to guide us on this path.
I'm so glad to hear that. And remember, this is just the beginning. There's a whole world of wisdom waiting to be discovered within the wings to awakening in other Buddhist texts. So I encourage you to keep exploring, keep practicing, and keep cultivating these incredible qualities within yourself.
Well, thank you so much for guiding us through this exploration. And for everyone listening out there, I hope this deep dive has inspired you to kind of embark on your own journey of discovery. And remember, the path to awakening is available to anyone willing to cultivate these inner qualities and walk the path with dedication. Until next time, keep diving deep.